Print, email, Facebook, Twitter. More life in irons. Brisbane's convict stories highlight role of Aboriginal people in penal colony. These 7 long years I've been serving now, and 7 long more have to stay, all for bashing a block down our alley and taking his ticker away. The song may be about Botany Bay, but Brisbane did not escape the tide of convicts transported to Australia in the 19th century. Media player, space to play, enter mute, left and right to seek. Oh oh colon oh 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 colon oh 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 colon oh 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 colon oh oh. Moreton Bay Penal Colony was established by the British government to reinstate transportation as an object of real terror to all classes of society. The brutally harsh settlement, an oppressive home to 3,000 male and female convicts, was focused around present-day Queen and William Streets. Some much smaller outstations existed at Dunwich, Eagle Farm, Limestone, Ipswich, and Cooper's Plains. Colony and island in Aboriginal land. Snow. The colony's history is being shared at the Museum of Brisbane's exhibition Life in Irons, Brisbane's Convict Stories. With the arrival of Europeans to establish the penal colony in 1824, thousands of local Aboriginal people suddenly found themselves sharing their land with convicts and soldiers. It was also essentially an island in Aboriginal lands, as historian and specialist on Aboriginal culture A. Kirkhope said. In conjunction with the museum, he designed a map of the inner city area of Brisbane as it would have been settled at the time. The purpose of it is to show that the convict settlement was existing within a pre-existent indigenous landscape of several campsites, pathways, sacred areas, burial areas and so on, Dr. Kirkhope said. It's included the naming of those areas to show that the convict settlement didn't exist in isolation but functioned within an indigenous world, and in fact at the time it was hugely outnumbered by the indigenous world. Dr. Kirkhope said initially the local people were amazed by the presence of Europeans and kept their distance, but that did not last. You had this immediate presence, like the Martians had landed, of a whole lot of new technologies and life patterns, he said. They found ways of interacting, and from 1825 until the end of 1842, really we know there was some trade, which meant items like steel and glass got traded around the continent very quickly. There were accounts that almost daily, their penal settlement was given fish and oysters, honey, bark and firewood by the local people. We've got accounts of hunting trips together too. Hunger and misunderstandings. The isolated penal colony was the furthermost North European settlement at the time and was reliant on stores arriving by ship from Sydney. And while the local Aboriginal people traded food with the colonists, it soon became problematic when the settlers began clearing land to grow crops. They cleared large areas of what had previously been rainforest and the resource areas of the Aboriginal people, particularly at South Bank and Kangaroo Point, Dr. Kirkhope said. South Bank had been a very complex area of rainforest, woodland and swampland which had basically been the breadbasket for the local people. They were semi-gardens that the local people maintained, so it wasn't a small thing if you decided to cut down a whole lot of forest and put your crops there. And that became a source of conflict because the settlers wanted their crops and the indigenous people are thinking, well, okay, we don't have our stretch of rainforest anymore but we have these crops, so why can't we take them? Fear led to attacks on villages. It began with small, occasional raids on gardens and fields by the Aboriginal people. But the situation grew to become so worrying to the colony's commander Patrick Logan that he sent soldiers to attack their villages. It started to become a big, organized thing by Aboriginal groups where 50 or 80 warriors would descend on the fields just as their crops were ripening or as it was getting dark, Dr. Kirkhope said. They planned it very well, and the amount they took, it wasn't for their food, because they realized the colony needed this, so let's see if we can starve them out. I should point out it was only once free settlement began that it really became a huge problem because all the land started to be opened up with settlers' huts everywhere. That's when you get really large conflict. Other first-hand accounts from Moreton Bay's early Aboriginal people and convicts can be heard at the exhibition. It features interactive storytelling, together with soundscapes and original documents from the penal colony such as a book of trials and a register of convicts, both of which are part of the UNESCO Australian Memory of the World Register. Along with the almost 200-year-old documents are works from Queensland Aboriginal artist Danny Mellor and sound artist Lawrence English, which add ambience and mood to the display. You can visit the free exhibition at the Museum of Brisbane until October 28.